Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Bon Voyage Besties with your hosts, Rosa and Rachel. Our podcast is all about travel, friendship, and empowerment. And today we have a super awesome guest with us, Jen Ruiz. Jen is a lawyer turned full-time travel blogger and content creator. She's also a best-selling author, award-winning travel journalist, and a TEDx speaker. Jen has been named a top Latina travel expert by The Points Guide and Me Too, and is a solo female traveler behind Jen on a jet plane. So everyone, let's welcome Jen to the show. I was like, that is one heck of an intro, Jen. I'm like, is there anything you don't do?
Thank you so much. You're so sweet, Rosa. I'm happy to be here and to be talking with you all. And it definitely does feel like I am very much stretched across all avenues. So happy to talk about all of that with you here today. Thank you.
So yes, we're so excited to have you on this show, Jen. Now, I am obsessed with your book, 12 Trips in 12 Months. And as a full-time, 9 to 5 corporate girly, I love this because a lot of times people think that they have to quit their jobs in order to be able to travel the world. And one of the things I didn't know prior to reading your book, I honestly assumed that you just gave up. You're like, I don't want to be a lawyer anymore. I'm just going to travel the world. But I was blown away to know that you were able to do all of this while having a full-time job. So tell us, what kind of inspired you to go ahead and take this amazing journey?
Well, thank you so much. And I absolutely agree. I think most people assume that if you're going to be traveling a lot within any span of time, that you're doing it full time, that you're fully nomadic. And that's not the case. I think for many people, you end up being somebody that's working a full-time job while you are building those income streams that allow you to ultimately become nomadic. So for me, in 2017, I had already been blogging for 3 years at that point. And I decided to take on a travel challenge the year before my 30th birthday. I really wanted to send out my 20s with style. I think a lot of people work all throughout their 20s. They just are trying really hard to achieve. And for me, I wanted to have a personal milestone. So I set out to take one trip every single month before my 30th birthday to also distract myself from reaching that big milestone. And that ended up becoming a 20 trips in a year that I took, all while being back in time for court, at 9 a.m. on Monday morning.
That is incredible. Just imagine you flying in on a plane to be in time for court. I totally know the experience being a teacher, like landing the night before at like 10 p.m., just knowing I have to wake up at 5:30 and be ready to rock it at 7:30. So I really admire that. I think it's awesome.
But it could be a little exhausting because I know I've done it too, where I've taken like a red-eye flight and then go to work straight after. It seems, fun, but it comes with some struggles too.
I was going to say exactly that. So I definitely cut it fast and loose on those flights. Like even you're saying that, Rachel, that you got there the night before. I think I was getting there the morning of, right? Like this flight lands at 5 a.m. and we have 2-hour drive back to the house and then we go straight into work. And I agree, it was exhausting. And it got to the point where towards the end of the year, it was hard to keep up with it all. I did use all of my leave, but I had this personal milestone that I really wanted to reach. So I think it was worth it because I had that challenge in mind. But I agree that as on a practical basis, it's probably more likely that somebody would be taking maybe less trips, but giving themselves the ability to work in that one day as a buffer when you come back, like you mentioned, Rachel. So you have some time to regroup after your trip and really go into work well rested and not like on zombie mode.
That's so true. It's funny because I think it was 2023, Wits was in Puerto Rico. And I was honest to God considering the red eye flight from San Juan back to Newark. I was like, well, I could still get into work on time at 7:30, but I didn't have the guts to do it. But I really was on the fence to maximize my time. So during that year where you were working towards this milestone, was there any particular trip that really, really stood out to you?
There were so many, and I ended up in places I didn't expect because I was just trying to find deals. So I ended up in Aruba unexpectedly because I found a $70 round trip flight. And I didn't realize that they had a desert, in the middle of Aruba, that it's this really unique landscape, that it's not just this Caribbean tropical scene that we're all used to. And I went swimming with sea turtles there, and I was able to explore shipwreck, and I was able to see a labyrinth in the desert, and just really wonderful things there in Aruba that I think you don't realize. Also having Dutch pancakes for the first time, which were delicious. So much great Dutch culture there and everybody. And then also in the south of France, I took a road trip through the south of France. That was a big bucket list thing for me because we always see these beautiful photos of people in lavender fields and, you know, in these gorgeous sunflower fields. And so I wanted to see France in full bloom. And I did a self-guided road trip around the country for a week over 4th of July weekend.
Nice. That sounds amazing. Prior to taking this whole journey, right, were you used to doing solo travel?
Yes. And so I think that I've always been comfortable with solo travel because I realized early on that if I was going to go, I was going to probably go on my own, especially as a young professional. You start to realize that people's schedules often conflict. You have people not necessarily having the same time off, people not having the same money to pay for the flight at the same time. It's really hard to coordinate. So I just started going on my own. And I think I had the confidence because I spent a summer abroad in Australia in law school. And so I had already lived, you know, a world apart from everybody else, 12-hour time zone difference. So I can't really call anybody if I need anything. So I had that really intense introduction to being a world away from everybody I knew, which was rough. And I definitely had some homesick moments, but I think I learned then and there that I really could do anything on my own, even when I have absolutely no one. I think I expected there to be a teacher, you know, somebody, another student there that was interning with me. It was just me. They just sent me to Australia. So,
Far as you can get.
really, it really is. And it's a big difference too in the mentality. So it's the first time that I really realized what it meant to be American and how Americans are regarded by the rest of the world and how we come off sometimes like very abrasive, gun yielding, you know. And so going to Australia and seeing that and seeing how people thought of us, it was just very eye-opening. Just so many, just really being in the whole opposite of everything that you're used to. And so I think I've sought that as a personal challenge. And I continue to find spaces where I'm new because I think it's really wonderful to see the growth that can happen from that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny because I never realized I'm a very loud person and I have a very loud laugh. I never realized quite how loud I was until I traveled to Paris for the first time. So I totally get what you mean, stepping outside your comfort zone and then realizing how you're perceived in other places.
Yes, yes. And you know, and you don't want to perpetuate any kind of stereotype, but sometimes you don't even realize, like you say, like with volume, same thing with me, right? I'm also very loud. I'm very colorful. I'm very much a presence. And it's just interesting when you go places to see what the contrast is. And for me, that was the first time that I experienced that. And I felt that I was seeing that firsthand, but I loved it. And I felt very safe in Australia, despite the fact that they have the world's deadliest animals, despite having like the world's deadliest everything. But putting that aside, like despite the fact that like the itsy bitsy spider could quite possibly take you out, it was, I think, a
You
really
sound like my daughter. My daughter's
spot.
like, I'm never going to Australia because of the giant spiders. I'm like, Sam, it's fine. Just focus on the kangaroos.
They don't even need to be giant. Like they could be the tiniest spider and it's the most lethal thing on earth. Like, I don't know why, but Australia has that. And then right next door to it, New Zealand has nothing that can harm you. So it's such an interesting juxtaposition of the two.
So awesome. I've been dying to go to Australia myself, but with me, it's the flight. I'm like terrified of a flight over 24 hours. But I always say if I ever am able to do that flight to New Zealand and I can run around and pretend to be a hobbit, I'll know I've gotten over my fear of flying. So that's the goal.
It's really wonderful. And actually, I got to New Zealand. Well, I got back from New Zealand by way of Honolulu, which is only about a 2 or 3 hour flight. So if you can manage to get to Honolulu, it's a much smaller length of time that you're on the plane from there, and you can break up the trip so you have some relaxation in between, you know, travel anxiety. But I agree, New Zealand is one of the most beautiful Middle Earth, like just scene. Everything is perfect. You have glowworms that are in the caves. You have the Hobbit houses from the actual set that they've been expanding since there's a lot of Hobbit attractions popping up around the world. So now they've you know, to compete. So they started, used to be you had only the facades of the houses there. But now they're building full out residences. They're not renting them out overnight yet, but they're allowing people to tour them and be, you know, in so-and-so's Hobbit house Yeah, so there's a lot to see there. And they have hot water beaches where you can dig a natural hot tub in the sand and just like sit there and have the tide come in and soak in the water. So it's a really beautiful place.
You
You're
sold
totally
us.
selling it to me. Yeah, it sounds incredible. So, Jen, you're obviously a very experienced solo female traveler. I've had the pleasure of being on a panel with you in New York. And one of the questions that Rose and I put together for this podcast was, are there any specific destinations that you would highly recommend to somebody who's a brand new solo female traveler, just getting into it, maybe a little apprehensive to get started?
Sure. I think that there's so many beautiful places right here in the US, if you are somebody that's US based, that you can go and see so that you're not going very far. And for your first trip, I do recommend doing something local, a day trip in your state, something within your own city so that you can build your confidence. You're still in a somewhat familiar setting. You're just getting some new experiences in. Beyond that, if you're going to go international, I try to go somewhere where you speak the language. It just takes away a level of, possible distress if you're somewhere that you're not understanding what you're reading, what you're seeing, what people are saying. So to have it be really easy the first time around, someplace like Australia, New Zealand, Ireland, even places that are really well versed in speaking English, even if it's not necessarily their dominant language. Like in Kenya, everybody speaks English. And so you can find places where that's going to not be an added struggle that you're adding, right? That problem of potentially getting lost in translation. It may be more challenging destinations like Japan or something like that. I would save that for later. And then from there, I think research is the number one thing. Like knowledge is power. And so if you're somebody who's not walking around on the ground, looking lost, trying to figure out the day of where you're going, that's all something that screams tourist, that screams, potentially going to get taken advantage of, pay prices that you don't need to be paying. So as much as it can sometimes take the sexiness out of travel, right, to have to take away that spontaneity and have to plan in advance, I think it's really an element of safety for women because you can know where you're going. You can have your schedule already planned. You're not looking lost. You have your transport already arranged and you can get to places safely. You can make sure that, you've shared your itinerary with friends and family so they know where you're going to be at any point in time. And you just have this added layer of structure to your day that allows you to have a little bit of peace of mind when you're traveling.
Yeah, lots of really good tips. I know for me, my very first solo trip was to Scotland. And I think it was the perfect choice because, again, you had the shared language. And I actually went on a fully guided tour called Haggis Adventures that was recommended on a travel blog. And that was a really good way to get started because I had that structure. And then afterwards, I could wander around Edinburgh without as much of a structure because I had found my footing, so to speak.
I think that's a great idea. I also second Scotland. I rode the real life Hogwarts Express in the Scottish Highlands, which was amazing. So for anybody just wanting to let their inner child play, I think Scotland's such a wonderful place to do that. The Highland Games, where you can see people participating in these, sports. So Scotland's wonderful. And I actually also second Haggis Adventures. I almost booked with them, but I was able to self-book the train for less than it would have cost to do the tour with them from Edinburgh. So I agree that they're a reputable provider and that you have options in how you want to see it. So I think if you want to be somebody that does a tour, if you want to rent a car and go on your own, if you want to kind of just base yourself in the city so that you can be using public transport and you don't have to worry about renting a car or driving long distances, you have options.
Those are some really good tips, especially being prepared. I remember for me, it wasn't necessarily that I was going to go by myself. I was actually going to go with my daughter. At that time, she was 12 years old, and we were planning a trip to go to Thailand. And my partner was like, yeah, just you two, all the way to Thailand. You're so far away. And I look young. My daughter's young. It's from a safety perspective, at least. I know I used to get a lot of backlash from my own family regarding traveling by myself because of the fear of something happening because I'm a woman. And I'm like, no, I'm prepared. These are the places that I'm going to be, same thing. I prearrange a lot of the trips. I didn't do anything by myself. I did organized tours because that also made me feel comfortable too. I was in driving. I hired a taxi that I had hired through a connection from the resort where I was staying. So being prepared, I think kind of helps feel a little bit more safe and gives you peace of mind, while also giving your family back home peace of mind that you're going to be safe and you're going to be as prepared as possible. But I'm curious, did you get any other backlash when you decided to embark on this adventure or while doing any of your solo travels?
My family was very supportive generally, and also my coworkers, the people that I worked with, although they didn't realize I would be quitting by the end of the year. I think maybe they would have acted a little bit differently if that was the case, but everybody was pretty supportive of me. Yeah, I think maybe there is a little bit of backlash in terms of like, why are you traveling solo? But I think also the fact that this has over time become my job. So now a lot of people see it differently because they know that I'm usually traveling for an assignment or, for work. So I think there's a little bit more faith in that because you're going to be there with the tourism board and they're going to be working with you to make sure that you're okay. And so I think that that's also been something that has helped ease their minds, right? Like when I went to Qatar for the first time right before the World Cup, I told my mom that, like, I think everybody was nervous and because they didn't know what to expect. And I'm definitely the first Puerto Rican in my entire lineage to have ever been like to anywhere near the Middle East. Like they have no idea. And I think that that's really something that set their mind at ease, sending them the itinerary, letting them know I'm there as a media representative, letting them know that, what I'm going to be doing and being really extra safe about it. I think it puts everybody at ease.
I totally agree. I know in my situation, I do the same thing. I always send the itinerary to my mom. Last summer, I did a 3-week trip solo to Japan, and I actually also sent the itinerary to my brother and sister-in-law, and I registered with the U.S. Embassy through the STEP program, which is free for Americans. So I do think doing those little steps does help put everyone's mind at ease. Even my coworkers, it was so cute. They were a little worried about me going all the way to Japan, and they were like, "We hope we're not overstepping our bounds, but can we text you when you're there?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." I'm like, "I'll send you pictures." Like, that's totally fine. So I do think doing those little things makes a big difference.
And I'll second the tours because when I've felt uncomfortable going out at night, I think at night is definitely when the nerves pop up. In the daytime, you can kind of feel bold exploring wherever. But at night, you're like, oh, I feel nervous. I want to see this, but I don't want to go by myself, especially nightlife kind of things. So I've done like a cocktail tour in Athens where I was able to go around with a group and we were able to go to different bars and try different cocktails. But I feel confident now going into this nightlife bar setting with other people as part of this organized tour where there's a woman that's designated to make sure that I get there safely, that I come back, and she's incentivized to do so because you're tipping them in addition. So I feel like you have this safe container. I similarly was in Amsterdam and I took a red light district tour with a group and we had like a historic walking tour of the red light district in Amsterdam, which I was very nervous to go and explore on my own, like at night on a Saturday night. So I think those tours are a great way to have this safe container and this safe environment for the amount of time that you need it. And it can be, an experience, a walking tour, 1 to 4 hours. It can be a day trip. In Japan, I took a day trip to see Mount Fuji and I went with everybody, on a full day tour. So it can be as long as you need it to be. And that's a kind of a secret weapon for safety.
Totally. And I love those organized tours, especially at night, like you said. When I was in Japan, I did a tour. It was called the Back Alleys of Osaka tour at night, and it did go into the red light district. And even though Japan is incredibly safe, and so is Osaka, it wasn't necessarily the sort of thing that I would do alone as a single woman. So it did make all of the difference just having that tour guide with me and friends that I met. And also the karaoke tours were great. I met so many friends who I went out to do more karaoke with later because I don't want to be singing by myself in a karaoke room. So I really appreciated that.
That's amazing. I need karaoke friends in my life.
We should all
You
go to
found one.
karaoke in New York. Let's make it happen.
Yes.
I love it. And that's a good tip also, like even for someone who's starting out and they want to adventure on, like you said early on, sometimes, you have friends that they're like, oh yeah, I'm down to go here and there. But when it's time to start planning and have the group chat, you make it to the actual trip, sometimes things fall apart. I know from my own personal experience. I had my daughter at a young age, so now she's off to college. So like I'm an empty nester, even though I'm only 40 years old. Meanwhile, my closest friends, they all have toddlers. So it's, hard for them to be able to go on trips, last minute adventures. So for me, solo travel kind of started a little bit later in my life. But same thing, I find a little bit more comfortable when I am going with the group. I started doing things more locally where I was joining different group tours. Like I did a food tour in New York City. And that's a way to kind of for me to step out of my comfort zone and be able to do something like on my own. And it did give me a little boost of confidence that I'm like, okay, I was able to do this in New York. What's next? And since then, I've gone on so many amazing adventures by myself. But at first, it was a little intimidating and I could be a little shy sometimes. So, like, even being out in a group setting, I sometimes felt a little bit lonely. The more I started to do it, the more comfortable I started to get, especially being able to kind of socialize. So I think group travel also is a great segue to kind of lead to that, solo adventure.
Absolutely. And I think, it's totally understandable. You had that built-in travel buddy for so long, right? With your daughter. And so it's a different way of traveling to get used to. But I think it's wonderful that you're embracing it. And I don't think there's any set age to do it. So I think, like, to your point, there's no point in your life when it's okay. It doesn't have to be when you're young. It doesn't have to be, when you're retired. You can embrace solo travel at any point in time, especially as a woman, as a way of really having this space where it's just you and your needs are the ones that are top of mind and are being met, because so many times we're balancing the needs of so many other people, particularly when you're a mom, particularly when you're running a household. And so having that solo trip allows the only question in your mind to be, what does Rosa want to do today? Not, what does anybody else want to do today? And that's such an empowering feeling.
It definitely is. Like, I know my very, very first trip, think I was telling Rachel, it was funny. I actually went on a work trip, and this was the first time I was in a hotel by myself. And I got to the room and I was like, wait a minute, I don't have to wear pants right now. Like, I can just like walk around in my t-shirt, watch the Hallmark channel and no one is around judging me. And it felt so liberating. And I remember going back later that night and telling my coworkers about it. And they were like laughing. They're like, wait, you don't walk around in like t-shirt and underwear at home? I'm like, no, I don't. So being like alone and like going to sleep when I wanted to go to sleep, waking up when I wanted, it was, a great time and a great way to kind of decompress. And like you said, take care of yourself, because we're so busy taking care of everyone else that sometimes we kind of forget to give ourselves some grace and give ourselves that moment to just be able to kind of unwind and relax.
Absolutely. And you earned it.
Yeah, 1,000%. That's the beauty of solo travel. You can be as selfish as you want. You can treat yourself as much as you want. I always think back to 2 years ago doing afternoon tea by myself in London, and it was unlimited sandwiches and pastries. I was just like going to town on these pastries and sandwiches and all this tea. And I'm like, there is nobody here to judge me. I'm going to eat as much as I want and I'm going to love it. And nobody can judge me for spending, what was it, like 105 pounds on afternoon tea either.
That is also very much a line of thinking that I subscribe to. One of the best parts of eating solo is that, yes, you can order all of the things, right? The appetizer, the dessert, the drink, and nobody can judge you. You can take anything to go and eat it later in your hotel room bed by yourself. It really is wonderful to be able to go and explore and taste and have these experiences. I was in Mexico City last, and I had Michelin star tacos, and I was at a Michelin star restaurant for lunch, and I was like, this is amazing.
Michelin star restaurants are the best for solo dining. If there's a bar, you can have 20 courses all for you. It's so fun.
Yes, the best bar in the world, the number one bar, it's not Michelin star, but the number one bar in the world right now is in Mexico City. And it was such a wonderful experience for somebody that was solo. I went there by myself and I thought this might be awkward because it's a bar, but I was sat at the bar. I had my own, little dining area. I had the bartender that was dedicated to serving the drinks. You had a 90-minute limit. So actually sitting by myself, I felt totally fine. I felt like the time flew. I didn't really, I was busy watching them make everything. So I thought it was actually a really nice setup for a solo traveler in a nightlife environment.
It reminds me of when I was in Tokyo. It was Michelin, but it was sushi. And like you said, they sat me right at the bar and it was 20 sushi courses, but it went by so fast because I was just watching them put together the sushi, and the sushi chef was so polite and so sweet. And I did not regret spending the $300 for that.
No, it's an experience. It's just the same way that people, pay to go skydiving, or they pay to, you're having this really wonderful memory that you're making. And for some people, it's through food. And it's so lovely to experience culture and the differences in places that you go through your palate. And so I'm glad that you had that and that you'll always remember that sushi.
Yes. Yes, I still dream about it.
Definitely worth the 14-hour flight to Japan.
Oh my gosh, I want to go back to Japan. We always gush about Japan on this podcast. So, speaking of amazing experiences, Jen, was there one particular experience that comes to mind, something maybe really unforgettable or really wild that happened to you while traveling alone?
I've had so many. And so I think, in the book, I talk about being serenaded at an opera in Florence. When I went there on my own, I didn't expect it at all. I went to go to see a small opera in a church, and I got there what I thought was early, but for Italian time was way, way early. So nobody else was there, and it was just some of the staff that was setting up. And because I was just there and it was just me, right? Maybe if I had been with somebody else, I would have been seated next to them. We would have been talking before the show. Maybe I would have, I would have already been entertained with that person and I would have just waited for the show to begin. But since it was just me, I had the opportunity to actually talk with the people who were there early and helping to set up and, at the ticket booth and everything. And because I had that extra time with them and I just asked questions, I was interested, how long have you been doing operas here? Is there a reason you picked this church over others? How do you pick your programs? Like just questions that I had because it was a really cool experience. And then halfway through the program, right before the intermission, they said that they wanted to announce a change in the program for the evening to dedicate a very special lady, a song to a special lady in the front row. And yes, and so I was looking around like, oh, what's happening? Who is here?
Who is this?
Yeah, like what? And I guess there's a celebrity that walked in. I'm not aware. And then all of a sudden, this Italian man just comes and just feet away from me, 2-3 feet away from me, starts bellowing this song out to me and serenading me with this beautiful song about the women in Granada, Spain. And it was just such a wonderful moment that reminded me of why I like solo travel. And it's because I think, yes, I'm all for planning, but I think the beauty about solo travel is that, yes, you've planned, but you've also left room for the destination to surprise you, for something to happen that you didn't expect in your day. And it's inevitable because when you're solo traveling, are interacting with everybody. It's almost like a ping pong game. And so your ping pong ball is going everywhere and you're you're going to all the different places on the ping pong board, right? And you're not at all sheltered from that. You don't have the buffer of a human to stop you from having that full experience. And so because of that, you end up interacting with people. You don't know where it'll lead. And a lot of times when people see that you're there, that you're by yourself, that you're curious, that you have this really positive, excited energy, they want to share with you special things about where they live so that you have this unique memory. They want to dedicate operas to you, right? They want to give you a special gift. They want to invite you to see, behind the scenes. So they will actually go above and beyond for people, all kinds of people, not, this is even before I was on assignment, just by being curious, because everybody wants you to have a good impression of their country. And everybody wants you to leave there and say, wow, that was really amazing. Like, wow, they had the best sushi, or wow, they had really wonderful art, And so if you come in with that positivity, with that excitement to be there, with that kind of zest for life, you never know in what ways that's going to be returned back to you.
That's beautiful. I love it. And also, too, the power of solo travel. In every trip, I mean, I've been on countless numbers of adventures and something always goes wrong. And it could be something, insignificant. Sometimes it's, something pretty big. And I feel like it kind of pushes you out of your comfort zone because you have to sometimes, think quickly. I remember one time I was traveling to Mexico and I accidentally boarded the wrong bus. And I was like, great, don't know how that even happened. I speak Spanish, so you would think I know how to read. I was on the right bus, but I wasn't. And, at first I was kind of freaking out because I was like, oh, here I am. I didn't have cell phone service. So, I spoke to the driver and he said, it's not a big deal. I can drop you off at the next stop. Just change buses. And in that moment, at first I was kind of freaking out because I was by myself. It was starting to get a little bit late. But then I was like, you know what? It's a quick pivot. I was able to, get on a secondary bus. Once I got there, I kind of had to change gears a little bit. Instead of walking like I was initially going to do to my hotel, I ended up having to take a cab. So it kind of pushes you out of your comfort zone, and it makes you, afterwards, when you kind of do encounter certain situations, you can look back, because I know from my experience, I was like, wow, I actually did that, I freaked out in the moment. Yes, I did. But I was able to navigate and get out of that situation. So I feel like it kind of builds a little bit of character too.
It does. And it is not something that will ever go away. So even at your most experienced, you will still have moments where you're like, Like, what? I did not expect that. I'm not really sure what to do right now. Having a bit of a panic. It happened to me just a few months ago on a cruise, and I was in Eastern Europe, and the Uber dropped me off in the wrong place, and I didn't have service. And I think the boat is leaving soon, and it's becoming like increasingly clear that I'm in an industrial port, not the like other port that I need to be at. And I see a ship that's with the same cruise line as mine, but they're like across this chasm, and like, you know, these like big stone like walls you have to climb after. So I'm sitting here like now in official panic mode, and I'm like screaming across the chasm to the people on the boat, and I'm like, hello, hello. Yeah. And it's not even my boat.
God.
But I don't care, right? Because you are the same boat line, so y'all should be able to walkie-talkie each other. I don't know, but somebody needs to help me, and I'm not leaving.
Busted. Oh my God.
It took a lot of repeated screaming. Honestly, they tried to just ignore me for a bit, like if I was just a crazy person, and I was like,
Oh,
I love it.
it's so funny. I'm picturing it in my head right now. That had to be horrifying in the moment, but it's also hilarious.
They're talking about me afterwards, like, oh my God, did you see that girl? But like, no, y'all need to put two and two together, because I clearly have an American accent. I clearly know what ship this is. I know the positions, and I'm asking for like a particular person to be called. I need somebody to get it together. Like, yes.
My God. Oh my goodness. But you got out of that situation. That's the important thing.
Did, and I made it back to the ship so flustered. And when I got in there, I let everybody know. I was like, I just went to the whole wrong port. I just ended up in the industrial. So,
They always make for the best stories.
yes.
Like I said, in the
They
moment, it's not funny, but looking back at it, you can laugh at it. But I know I've been in that situation. The same thing happened to us in Greece. I was with two of my friends, and they dropped us off at the wrong dock. And the guy just like left, and we're just there. We're like, we don't see any boats. And the same thing, it was more like industrial, like fishermen kind of area. And we were like, what the hell are we going to do now? It was like at 6 o'clock in the morning. Finally, we see on the opposite side. So here we are, three girls with all of our freaking luggage, like running, sweaty, and same thing as you. And everyone that was boarding the cruise or the boat, they were all Greek. So they're probably looking at us like, what the hell are they even saying? It was not fun. It was not fun. That was like a crazy trip.
Oh my goodness. I always say like there's no shame in yelling and asking for help, because the odds are if people are judging you, you're never going to see them again. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So do what you have to do.
You'll
Yeah.
get someone's
I was
attention.
desperate. I was not leaving
I
there
would
until
be too.
somebody called somebody from the boat. The captain had to come out, and the captain looked at me like I was psycho too. But I was like, I'm a passenger aboard this ship. It's like, so, I wasn't about to miss the ship, have to go find another dock. I wasn't doing all of that.
No, hell no.
My gosh, I love hearing like all the travel fails, because I feel like a lot of people sometimes, you know, they're nervous of traveling, especially traveling abroad to a different destination, maybe if they don't know the language, because they're always afraid, what if something goes wrong? And like, even for us as avid travelers, like I said, I know in every single one of my trips, I could name you 100 things that typically can go wrong. And it's just kind of, you know, switching your mindset, overcoming and finding a solution. And you can't focus or dwell on, you know, anything negative that kind of happens on a trip, because it kind of makes for a fun story afterwards.
Yeah, it happens to the best of us. It really does. I know it's more of a United travel fail and not my personal travel fail, but a couple of years ago, I was in Madrid with a friend of mine, and United canceled the flight because Newark was having a hold. Like there were storms, and the FAA was like, you know, no flights are leaving. So my flight was canceled, and I'm texting with United, and they were like, yeah, we can get you on a flight 3 days from now. Well, I had to then text my supervisor at school, get coverage. I was posting in Google Classroom to have my lesson plans up. And my friend who I was traveling with was really upset because she had not done her taxes before going on the trip, and tax day was like 2 days away. So she's trying to do TurboTax on her phone. So I had to leave and like just take a walk, clear my head. But then at school, I'm not sure who did it, but the kids were told that I was stuck in Spain and they had no idea when I would be back. So apparently the kids all freaked out. I don't know if they thought I was sitting in a jail cell somewhere or what. But the day I came back, my supervisor, who's now retired, comes to me and she's like, Rachel, instead of teaching today, I want you to sit and talk to the kids and tell them what happened. And I had kids coming to me in tears, like, we didn't know if you were going to be back, Miss Miller. And I had another kid, like, I was ready to DM United and tell them off. And I was like, oh my God, this is like such a fail.
They thought they were going to see Miss Rachel on Locked Up Abroad. No.
Yeah.
Thankfully, made it.
Thankfully not. And that used to be a ritual. Actually, before all of my solo trips, I would watch Locked Up Abroad and have a little marathon. I don't know if I recommend doing that, but it was kind of entertaining for me.
Oh my gosh. So Jen, I'm curious to know, at what point did you decide, all right, I'm not going to continue down, the corporate career, being an attorney, and I want to kind of navigate being a full-time content creator, which, by the way, I love watching all of your TikTok videos. They're super informative. I love them. You posted a series about Egypt. And when I planned my trip to Egypt last year, I was like, I'm going here, here, and here. So thank you.
I'm so happy to hear that. And I agree. I think that's why TikTok ended up taking off for me, because I found that I could be informative and put like more substance rather than just have an aesthetic of the photo, which was always really hard for me to reach in Instagram. Like, climb to the top of this mountain, now switch into this dress, now twirl on top of said mountain. Like, like it was a lot of work to get that perfect image with Instagram. So at the end of that year, I self-published my first book at the end of my 12 trips challenge. And I self-published my first book on how to find affordable flights, because I didn't realize that I had inadvertently been marketing that book already for a year just by sharing the flight deals that I was finding throughout that challenge. And so everybody wanted to know, how did you get to Aruba for $70 round trip? How did you find a $38 flight to New Zealand? How did you do these things? And so I wrote my first book to answer the questions that people were asking me. And then once I did that, that was proof to me that I could have my own digital product, that I could be an entrepreneur and make money online through my own efforts. I had already been teaching English online, so I knew I could make money remotely. And I had that as a crutch while I was making the transition, earning $20 an hour and being able to teach anywhere. But it was really that book that was the first proof that I had that as an entrepreneur, as Jen on a jet plane, I could have my own income. After that, I monetized my website. And then after that, I started getting brand sponsorships, campaigns, things like that.
That's really, really amazing, because I know a lot of the digital space, making that pivot can be really scary for some people, being like, I'm going to leave my full-time job. And I'm glad you mentioned that, like, during that transition period, you were teaching English to supplement your income until you could make that leap. Because sometimes with social media, people make it seem super seamless and easy, when in reality, there's a lot of steps you have to take.
Absolutely. And it was years. It was years that I still had teaching online. And I remember it was at a point where my career was doing well and everybody sees me, in esteem. And I remember being ashamed and thinking to myself, like, oh, I hope nobody finds out that I still have to wake up and like teach kids, like, for hours in the day. Because I was embarrassed, because I agree. I think there's that kind of, you have to achieve this level and be this overnight success and immediately transition and be making all of this money. And it took a long time for me. It took me 4 years before I even, made my first money on my self-published book. From there, it took me another year to monetize my website. So 5 years of blogging total before I even made any dollar from my site. And then really trying to figure out, how is it that I can make this a sustainable business? And I think also for me, I had my stuff kind of right when I had gotten my blog earnings to $3,000 a month. And I was aiming for $5,000 a month off of Mediavine. And I was like, oh, this is great. We're trucking, like we're hitting milestones. We're getting more and more traffic. And then all of a sudden, all my traffic crashed during the pandemic. And I went from making $100 a day on ads to making $3 a day on ads. And so I saw that this trajectory that I had just overnight was completely ripped away from me. And that made me so fearful that I would put myself 100% into anything again and then have that be ripped from me. So since that time, I've spent the last 5 years or so juggling so many different income streams. And I've sometimes wondered if that's the right thing, because I know I could grow more if my only thing was TikTok and I'm just sitting here and the only thing I'm doing all day, every single day is creating TikTok videos. I would grow my TikTok a lot faster than if I'm also simultaneously writing 6 books and simultaneously trying to grow my speaking portfolio and getting speaking engagements and, making my speaker reel and making TV appearances and trying to grow myself as a brand. Like, I am spread so far across so many things, but it's my version of job security because I will never put myself in a situation again where I wake up and something out of my control has ripped away all of my income. And so in this space, I've realized that diversification is key.
And that is so important. And I think anyone who's looking to get into travel content creation needs to realize that, because something similar happened to me. Like, I had the pandemic, and then Google recently had a bunch of lovely updates that hit a lot of travel blogs, and my earnings took a nosedive. And after that, it really made me realize, like, I can't just rely on Google. Like, I have to wear many, many hats in order to keep this sustainable, because putting like your whole business into one basket as a travel entrepreneur, it's just not gonna work, because like you said, something out of your control could completely happen. Like, I had no idea that the helpful content update, or whatever they call it, was gonna hit my site so hard.
I think nobody did. And it was always assumed that blogging was the safe space, right? Because you own this space and it's your own website. And the older your site gets, the more site authority and domain authority that it has. So the more it's going to rank, and you're going to have this big, reserve of really relevant articles that you're just adding more and more to your site. And I think it can work still. I think that's how all of these sites make money, right? Like, all of them, even Nat Geo right now is social first, web first, like their print model is second. They're making money off the ad revenue from their sites. Afar, Travel and Leisure, Condé Nast Traveler, it's the same thing as a blog. It's just that they're run like a business. And so they have people that are on there cranking out articles every single day. I think I just saw a website that was building itself up, like a new startup-ish website, and their goal is 5 articles a week. And so if you're a blog that's publishing 45 blog posts a week, obviously you can still take off. Obviously, you're still going to have that same kind of exposure, but it's really difficult, I think, now as a blogger, because, because you are competing with these content mills, because you do have a lot of, even just in organic search traffic results, you're seeing you have to scroll down all the way to the bottom of the page before you even get to an organic result that's not sponsored or isn't an AI summary of something. And so I think we all thought that it was going to be foolproof, but I think what I've noticed is that when you're in this space, anything can go at any time. And that's kind of the nature of entrepreneurship. And it's okay. And that's why we chose to be here, right? If you're here, it's because you kind of like it. You don't want the mundane. You don't want to be an accountant and have a really predictable job,
Like profession.
You don't.
There's a CPA and would agree with you. So true. And the CPA is like the worst for that. So I have a student, and he was like asking me, he was like, if I want a job that's really carefree and is going to make money, how's accounting? And I was like, my father would say no to that, because you're beholden to the IRS.
Yes, but I agree. I mean, I think this is definitely, it's a topsy-turvy ride. And so I think maybe sometimes, and that's why it becomes difficult for people who do want to do it full time, because they don't realize how much of it is going to be different from the stability that comes with a job and from the stability that comes with knowing where the next paycheck is going to come from. Like, entrepreneurship is a constant hustle. You are constantly selling to clients, to consumers. You're selling your services. You're marketing yourself as an expert. Like, it's sales all day long. And for some people, it ends up being different than what they envisioned this to be, right? They think that they just want to be a creative. But if you're just a creative and you have no sales and no marketing, starving artist is definitely also not the route that I wanted to go. Accounting? No. Starving artist? No. We're going to find like other alternatives.
So true.
But it's so true, especially the whole point about diversification. I know for myself, so I work full time. I have my degree in accounting, even though I do nothing with accounting. I manage residential properties, which is, a lot of fun, and it pays my bills, and I do content creation on the side. But for myself personally, as much as I love and enjoy content creation, having the job security and a steady paycheck is what continues to keep me on my 9 to 5. And having content creation is something that I can do for fun and kind of a little bit of release, but it's still a job, and it's very stressful. People think like, here you are in this 5-star hotel, all expenses paid and yada, yada, but they don't realize all the work that goes into it. So content creation is not for the faint of heart, and also juggling that while also juggling a lot of other things. Like you said, pitching yourself, doing interviews, promoting your book. It's a lot of work. And, it's something that if you want to do it, it's definitely worth your while, because anything that you love and enjoy is worth the time and the effort, but it's not easy at all. And I've been doing this now for a few years, And the more I do it, the more that I find myself like in awe of people that can do this full time.
Same, 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 same.
It's also why I don't really stress about sharing the how to, because I have so much respect for anybody who does it, right? I think at the end of the day, people get so scared and they guard the secrets and they don't want to share how they got here. But to get here, you still have to put in the work. It's not enough to know like how we got here. You still have to actually do the steps. You still have to do the 16-hour days. You still have to do, the posting of everything, learning coding, like building your own site. There's so much that goes into it. I don't think the space is too saturated. I feel like if you want to jump in and add your voice, add your voice. You have a unique perspective and you have something different to offer and a way of seeing the world that other people don't have it. And it's really also difficult, similarly in the podcast space, right? Like so many people have podcasts, but how many people are consistently recording? How many people are consistently releasing? How many people are lasting beyond, the first year, the second year, things like that? And so it really is a test of longevity in the digital space and adaptability. And if you are somebody that knows this is something that you want to pursue, you just have to be willing to, it's a game of outlasting others and knowing that you're not going to have necessarily, it's possible, but for the majority of people, there's not that overnight virality and success where all of a sudden you're Jules LeBron and you have coined Demure and you have like, you're being flown all over the world to participate in all these campaigns. Like it does happen. And it's such a lower amount than the people who just put in the work every single day, day in and day out, when they're not seeing results for years until it starts to pay off.
Yeah, it's true. You have to be consistent and you have to be willing to be in it for the long haul. Like I always look back on my website and like freshen it up and take out dead links. And I cannot tell you the amount of travel blogs that died during COVID because so many people just could not get past it, and it was like kind of sad to see, but I can name a ton that didn't make it past 2020.
I agree. Because if people aren't making money, it becomes a money pit. And that's another reason why I don't feel bad about bloggers and influencers charging for their work, because this is not something that you're doing for free. People are paying for hosting. People are paying for site design. People are paying for equipment. My drone, my DSLR, the GoPro, all of this footage that I'm using, it's all money. And so I think a lot of people expect that the travel blogging will end up paying off and all these free trips that they're running to take. And then you realize that even the free trips aren't worth it if it's costing you the ability to go to other places, to make other things. I've gone on trips before where I've come back and yes, it's been an amazing trip. And yes, the trip is worth a lot, but I've come back in the red. So now I've done a week of work, but after I've tipped the guides and I've tipped the driver and I paid for my airport parking or whatever the case may be, because I'm solo, I don't have anybody to drop me off. I come back and now I've worked for a week and I am negative $400. And so please explain to me how that computes and how that works like as a business model. And it is a grind, and it is sometimes a thankless grind that you're doing for years, investing a lot of your time and effort. And so because of that, I do believe that you should get paid for your work. I do believe that influencers and bloggers are worth compensating. I think there should actually be a minimum wage. Like even if we're just talking like $100 a post kind of thing, like I think there should be a minimum wage for this new digital era and gig employees that we're having. Yeah, but I've noticed a difference.
I really like what you said about getting paid, because a piece of advice that I would give to anyone coming into the space is don't be taken advantage of. Like read about contracts, ask the questions on social media. Don't let a free product or a free trip entice you if the brand is going to be using your likeliness forever, because I've noticed that they'll slip shady things into contracts like that. Like, oh, we can use these images in perpetuity, which is forever. So you have to be aware of the business model to not be taken advantage of. Because while I do think there are a lot of amazing brands out there that do want to work with influencers and content creators and do the right things, there's also a lot of shadiness that goes on too.
What happens a lot of times also, if they've hired a PR firm, the PR firm's goal is to get the most exposure, the most impressions, all of that for the least amount of money that they're spending for their client. And so a lot of times what they'll do is they'll bulk email people. I get these all the time on behalf of big clients, airlines, broadcast communication companies, big clients. And so they will bulk email you and they'll say, hey, this is the campaign. These are the deliverables. This is the set rate. Like, do you agree? Are you interested? Yes or no? And they're just farming to see who would agree and accept that rate. and how they can pit people against each other so that they can get the lowest rate for their client, which I don't begrudge anybody doing their job. I just think it really helps as an influencer, as a creator, if you're aware of what everybody's doing and what everybody's job is. I think it helps you pitch people better and understand where you fit in. Similarly, I think a lot of people end up pitching editors and they don't really know how to pitch editors for freelance articles because you're not really knowing what it is that they need and how, so you're wasting their time with a pitch that wasn't made correctly. You have like 5 paragraphs in there that are completely unrelated. So I think it's really important to know who you're pitching and really tailor that specifically so that you can get the best results. And that includes, goes from tourism boards to travel magazines to anybody that you're really trying to work with. Because a lot of people in this industry come off as unprofessional because they just don't know what they're doing, how to talk to people, what the KPIs are. Like, what is this person looking for? Every person's going to be different. The earned media person, I see so many bloggers apply for earned media press trips. And in my mind, I'm thinking like, it's frustrating to me because I know that they're like, oh, nobody cares about my blog. And I'm like, you're not targeting the right person. Like this person's only job, this PR person's only job is to go back and say to them, I got you in Travel and Leisure. I got you in National Geographic. I've had a PR person tell me once before, like if I got a feature in National Geographic, like I could do nothing for the rest of the year. My job would be done. And so if you know that, and you know that your blog is not National Geographic, you're not meeting what it is that they're looking for. Whereas if you have just one article on National Geographic, you're much better positioned to end up working with that person because you know that that's what they're looking for. So I think a lot of people aren't aware of how this industry works and they're just kind of crazy out there pitching themselves for everything travel because they just want free travel. So I think just knowing and being able to distinguish, sometimes I write to people and I'll immediately sense that I'm talking to the wrong person. Like I wrote to somebody and I saw they wrote me back and they were like, oh, we can offer you a media pass. And I was like, oh, I'm talking to the earned media person. She thinks I'm writing to her as a journalist. I need to talk to the influencer person so that they understand that I'm looking for payment for these deliverables. And it's okay. Like you just have to be aware of it. And so many people in this industry are not aware and they're just grasping and throwing spaghetti at the wall because they just want free trips. So if you're somebody that actually is aware of the industry, is aware of how it works, is aware of who you're talking to, you're already putting yourself worlds ahead.
And that's
Definitely.
a good point too, because I think it kind of helps all of us in the content creation space. Because when brands are seeing that we're like, no, a free product or even like, great, you're hosting me at this 5-star hotel. That's amazing. However, I have to create all these deliverables. I know for me, I have a rule that I will not do a free trip or a comp trip if I have to use like my paid time off. Because now I'm taking paid time off from work to go do work. It doesn't make any sense. So like when I take a paid time off to do a press trip, unless I'm going to get paid, then it's not worth my while. And I have passed on opportunities that on paper, I'm like, am I really going to say no to this? Like, it sounds awesome. But like you said, you're coming back from these trips and you're like exhausted. You didn't really get to like enjoy yourself sometimes. You're overconsumed with creating content. And I feel like the more that we stand up for each other and kind of set this presence, people will know like, okay, content creators have to get paid for these opportunities. And it just kind of paves the way for all of us.
I agree. And it's an interesting field to be in because, things are still developing as we go. And you always have the pushback on the other end as well of people being like, well, I'm a small restaurant owner. I'm a small hotel owner. Like I am also a small business. And so, but I agree. I think in barter, it usually doesn't end up being to the creator's benefit and it does end up being more work. You're not actually enjoying the destination. And that is the big peril of doing this for work. I know, again, it seems glamorous. It seems fun. These are first world problems that people really just don't comprehend. But when you are there 16-hour days on somebody else's itinerary, perhaps risking your life, because I've done physical activities where I have been physically injured before because this was on the itinerary. I've ended up upside down in class 4 whitewater rafting, hitting every single boulder on the way down with my body. So you are risking your life at times at these trips. And it becomes to the point where you're like, wow, that was a lot. I'm physically hurting. Like I'm actually like exhausted. I just took all this time, like you said, or PTO or time away from your family or other things that you could have been doing to come back with less money. I know it's such a privileged standpoint because we're in such a place to be able to have these opportunities, but work is work. And even when it's something amazing, a good way to put it would be something like Hollywood, right? That everybody thinks is so glamorous. It would be so glamorous to work at a TV set and be surrounded by celebrities and be at the awards show and the Academy Awards. But you would never expect the person that's operating that camera to be there for 16 hours, and be like, oh, you're just here for the experience. Like you enjoyed being here, right? The atmosphere was what fueled you. Like that's your compensation, like soaking in the vibes of the location and the movie set. Like, no, these are people that are working, yes, in a dream field, yes, in a really wonderful place that most people will not be able to see, like working the Oscars, but you still expect them to be compensated for the work that they are doing because it is still work. If you're not free to leave, if you're not free to decide not to participate, to decide to take a nap for the whole day and just opt out of it altogether, you are there for a work trip. And so you should be compensated. And I know that that'll never be the case because there'll always be people that are trying to build their portfolio that are already in that destination that will take the things for free. But I don't worry so much about that. I don't worry about who's going to take the things for free that I'm not taking. I just worry about, because that's too much. Like, you've already rejected that opportunity. So who cares who picks it up? I just worry about making space for the right opportunities to come for me. And so, because I've seen personally that when I do take on an unpaid opportunity because of a scarcity mindset where I think nothing else is going to come, let me take this, it's still really great to be able to go and have this, I will get the opportunity for that same weekend, like 2 weeks later, that could have been paid, but now I have that spot that's filled. So I focus on clearing my space so that I have the opportunity to take on the paid opportunities when they come up, and that I'm able to do that and I have that availability and that opening. And then I make sure that I am building my brand in the meantime, in that downtime, right? I don't need to be on a trip all the time. Your brand is actually built a lot in the time that you are home, actually processing all the content that you've gathered.
Yeah, that's really true. And that's something I had to learn the hard way. There was one summer and two of the trips, they were personal trips. One was with my mom and one was a solo trip. But it was over my summer vacation, which is 2 months. And I had 3 press trips squeezed in between. And I was exhausted. I was wrecked by the end of that summer. Actually, on the flight home from London, I got sick on the plane. I was like throwing up. It was awful. I won't go into it. But I think part of that was just from the sheer exhaustion. I was sort of operating from a scarcity mindset, like, oh, I can do all these trips and build a name for myself. But at what cost? Like, it's still really hard work and I'm still exhausting my body at the end of the day. And like you said, people should be compensated for work. I mean, I don't go coach soccer because of the vibes. I coach soccer because I enjoy it. It's fun, but I get a stipend and it's, important.
Yes.
Yeah, no,
I agree.
totally. And like you said, knowing your worth and obviously kind of weighing out the opportunities too. Not to say that taking an unpaid press trip is a bad thing. Like you said, Jen, maybe you're building your portfolio, but making sure whatever it is that you're doing, that you're actually valuing your time and that it is worth your value. Because like if you're just getting hosted at a hotel that would normally cost $200 for the night and you have a long list of deliverables, is that $200 really worth your while? Versus maybe you're getting hosted somewhere where like the value of the package is $5,000 and maybe you don't have any deliverables. So really weighing out the opportunity and just making sure that whatever it is that you're doing and signing up for, it is worth your while and that you are compensated your value.
I agree. And I would never shame anybody for taking a free trip because I understand how the industry works, how people start off. And that's why I said I don't think it'll ever stop. And that's why I don't worry about who is taking the trips that I decide not to take. And there's no one price that's okay for people because people have a different ideas of what the value is. So I think what you decide to work on is always very personal. And so when people ask me like, what should the rate be that I sell my photos, in perpetuity for, whatever the case may be, I just tell them, this is what you have to consider. How would you feel? What is the amount of money that would make you feel okay if 10 years from now you see yourself on an ad with this being used? Like, what amount of money would make you feel like that's still okay? And that's such a personal thing. What amount of money in terms of the barter and the trade is worthwhile for you? People take cruises to Antarctica that are, $20,000. And to them, that's a dream thing. So I don't judge anybody. I just know that for me, because I am a single income household, because I am, a single person LLC, all of the pressure to make the money and to pay the bills falls on me. And so I know that I personally have had to prioritize things that make me money because I don't have a steady 9 to 5, because I don't have a husband. I just have me. And so for me, that's had to be a hard line that I personally draw. And I think that that's for anybody who's doing this and considering it, there's no shame in what you feel is valuable for you and what you share. That's going to always change and you can always update your rates. You can always, decide that you get to a point where you are going to be charging. I think it's very personal and it's based off of what feels good to you, because ultimately the goal is for you not to feel exploited.
I know for me, just like you said, it's so different for everyone. And if you have that gut feeling that you're being taken advantage of and a situation doesn't feel right, you could say no and you can walk away. Like it's good to operate from that mindset, like you said, that there are always more opportunities available. It is a big space, it's a growing space. So if something doesn't feel right in your gut and the brand is not willing to negotiate, not willing to budge, it is perfectly fine to walk away because more opportunities will come for you. And hopefully they're opportunities you feel more comfortable with. And it's so personal to everybody.
Jen, I'm curious to know. So I feel like I've seen you, on TikTok. I've seen you speak at conferences. You have this amazing book, by the way, that I love. And it's a huge inspiration. So if you haven't, definitely, I bought it on Amazon. Definitely link it on the show notes. I highly, highly
I love
recommend.
the colors
Right?
on the
It's so
cover. Yeah, it matches
pretty.
my
So maybe,
headphones. It's so bright and
Thank
happy.
you. Thank
I
you.
love it. What is next for Jen? What is next for Jen on a jet plane?
I'm actually working on the sequel to 12 Trips in 12 Months. So this was about, and my goal is really to empower women and to make women feel like they can use travel as a way to find clarity and purpose, especially in a point of transition in their lives. So, for you at this point, Rosa, where you're transitioning to being an empty nester after having had a child young, this is a beautiful example of how travel can help ease that transition and help you be excited about the next stage and help you find empowerment in yourself, while you're doing this. So that's really my goal and what I want to do with these books. So 12 Trips in 12 Months was meant to capture the idea of, women expiring by 30, that you have to have your worth by then, that you have to be married with children with the perfect career. And if you haven't reached it, well, then too bad. Now you're entering Spinsterville. You should adopt the cats and just like give up on life altogether. Because that's the programming. You are worthless. And so that's what we tell people.
Way past that.
I'm single at 37, so that says it all, man.
Yes. That was I think the first stage, right, where we realize how much of that is targeted towards women. The sequel is going to pick up at my 35th birthday, now well into like that kind of over the hill point. And now really coming to terms with the same lessons, but I guess in a little bit more of a mature way. Like, so yes, the romantic thing hasn't happened. How can you take personal accountability for that? What are the lessons that you can learn from it? How do you need to heal to be able to be a good romantic partner in the future? So you're not repeating these patterns, as somebody for self-worth, and love. The sequel is going to be about a challenge that I took after I got the book contract. So I was doing it thinking that I was going to be promoting the book. It starts with getting dumped by my boyfriend of 2 years on my 35th birthday on a sponsored cruise, no less. So we're there like
My
for
God.
a trip.
Kick them off the boat.
Take them off board.
The same day my Facebook was hacked too. So I'm already going through a minor, not even minor, major crisis because like your Facebook being hacked is a big deal.
Yeah.
And so I went to Egypt after that, immediately after, and I had the chance to make a wish on a magic scarab statue in Karnak Temple. And, I'm very big on wishes and like I know all the rules for wishes and how wishes work. And so I knew that you could only really make like one wish. You had to walk around the statue 7 times and make the wish. And so I had the choice to either wish for my Facebook account back or wish for my boyfriend back. And I will say that miraculously, 2 weeks later, I got my Facebook account back.
That's amazing. Yay! Victory! I would have picked the Facebook account too. Anyone dumps me on a sponsored trip, I don't even want to say what happened. It's not appropriate for the podcast. I'll tell you the story after. Talking about.
We don't promote violence on this podcast, however.
So the book picks up there, and it's not really about him, but more about where I pick up once he's left in my life and how we can reinforce all those lessons of self-worth, of age not defining you as a woman, of finding, travel as a way to heal yourself. That was the year that I took the real life Hogwarts Express. I did the kintsugi class in Japan. I went to see the Moai and Easter Island. So I had so many moments of letting my inner child out and really just being free and being myself. And so I hope that the lessons in that book will reinforce to women, the beauty of this journey and the beauty of being on your own timeline and discovering yourself along the way through these adventures that you're taking, and hopefully encouraging more women to push themselves to have similar experiences.
Love it.
Yeah, that's such a good note because I do think there's still this idea that like after 35, like, oh, you should be just like at home with like all the cats. And I love my foster cats, But I love this idea that there's still so much life to be lived with or without a partner. It's an amazing place to be.
And in any stage of life, too, I feel like there's not a time clock on traveling, discovering yourself, because every stage of life is different. I know, in my 20s, my 30s, and like I said, now I'm in my 40s. Every stage of my life has been different. I view travel differently. Like now, my partner and I get to go to different destinations that before we didn't get to go to because our daughter was younger and couldn't necessarily experience these things. And even now, traveling with my daughter Samantha, who's going to be 20 years old, even kind of seeing things from her perspective. It's like a completely beautiful journey at any age of life, whether you're in your 20s, your 50s, your 60s. You shouldn't wait for that perfect moment to start adventuring and discovering yourself, because every stage in life is completely different. And I love how you
So
just,
beautiful.
empower us to do that. So I love it, Jen. Thank you.
I agree wholeheartedly. I think my last stage in life is going to be like the 80-year-old and up full-time cruiser, like the people that just live on the cruises all the time.
Yes.
I can picture
My
you
my parents. My parents, they're in Florida right now and as snowbirds. And a lot of the people who they, talk to in the pool, a lot of them love cruises and go to these amazing places on the cruise. And I'm like, that is going to be me. I aspire to be these people. I want to do the long, month cruise all over Southeast Asia. That's going to be me in my 70s and 80s.
I
Absolutely.
always
It's the
joke
way to
around. I
do
was
it.
like, I did have a wild 20s. So I'm like, when I'm in my 80s, I will be that drunken grandma table dancing in a bar somewhere. I feel like, I did my 20s wrong. So I'm like, I'm going to make up for it when I'm in my 80s.
Good. We support you. We'll be right there with you on the adjacent tables.
Yeah. It reminds me of when I was in my 20s, I was in Split, Croatia on a backpacking trip in a hostel and all. And we went down to this beach bar. And on top of the stage, there was this older woman. She had to be in her 70s. She was dancing with these two shirtless young guys, smoking her cigarette. It was like 2 a.m. And me and the girl I met in the hostel, we were like, that's it. That is who we want to be in our 70s. And then she got off the stage and everybody started booing and was like, no, come back. So then she gets back up and then the crowd went nuts. They were like, yes, queen.
That'll be us.
Yeah, we're putting it in the universe. That's going to be all of us. Yes.
Exactly. Life goals. Oh my God. But Jen, thank you so much. It's been so great having you on the show. So if you had to give one piece of advice for someone who's out there, whether they're looking to transition maybe in their careers or they want to take the plunge into solo traveling, what would that be?
Well, for taking the plunge for solo travel, I would say book the flight first, figure out the details later. Once you find the cheap flight, the other things can be arranged. There's always going to be a place for you to stay. There's always going to be things to eat. There's always going to be things to do. So booking the flight is really just that one step you need to do to commit yourself to actually making that trip happen. And if you're somebody that is looking to transition and do something different, break into digital entrepreneurship, I would say the best advice I can give you is to pick your skill set, not necessarily the platform, because the platforms will change all the time, but pick what it is that you enjoy doing. So if I like writing, I could express writing through my blog, through the freelance travel writing for magazines, through my books. If I like videography, I could be taking short form videos. I could be making YouTube content. I could be trying to be on a TV show or make my own, TV show or documentary or something of the sort. So pick your skill set, photography, writing, speaking, videography, whatever the case may be. And that's going to be what you're nurturing to build a business.
Beautiful. I absolutely love it. All good advice. I'm taking it to heart. I'm already thinking, what flights can I look for to get those trips on the calendar, because that's how I roll. So Jen, we really, really, really appreciate you being on the show. Thank you so much. We had the best time and we bet our audience has learned so much. It was a lot of fun. And just to reiterate, where can our audience find you on social media?
Thank you, Rachel. You can find me at Jen on a Jet Plane on all social channels, and my website is jenonajetplane.com.
Wonderful.
Awesome.
Thank you so much. So this was another great episode of Bon Voyage Besties. As a reminder, please give us 5 stars wherever you listen to podcasts. And you can find us at Bon Voyage Besties on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, all the things. And we love you guys, and we'll see you in the next one.
Bye, guys.